Welcome to Trends with Benefits, a podcast by Van Eck with a forward-looking perspective. We explore new ways of thinking about the markets, investing, work, and life. Here's your host, Ed Lopez.
Welcome to Trends with Benefits. I'm Ed Lopez, and I'm here with Douglas Boneparth of Bonafide Wealth. Douglas, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're president of Bonafide Wealth and a financial advisor. Do you consider yourself a financial advisor, financial consultant? Do you draw a distinction?
Financial advisor, I would say is, it's either that or financial planner, but financial advisor seems to be the go-to.
Yeah. So, we're talking right now and we're probably both still working from home doing the whole COVID, social distancing thing. I hope things are well with you and your family. How are things going?
Yeah, everything's good so far. Everyone's healthy, which is most important. We're here at home. I'm in my basement where our office, used part of the time, is now getting used a lot more. But everyone's good. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I have my mother-in-law here, which is proving to be a very valuable extra set of hands. So I have everything I need. I'm very fortunate for that, and everyone's doing okay. This is absolutely wild, but grateful that what I do, and for the most part what my wife does, is able to be done remotely. Adding the kids and full-time care to the equation certainly makes things interesting, and despite the extra set of hands, my mother-in-law works as well. So you got 3 working people, 2 kids trying to play, and just balancing all of that. It certainly isn't something we thought we'd be dealing with, but here we are.
Yeah, totally. Definitely adapting on the home front. How have you adapted on the work front? How has it impacted your business and the ability to grow your book and grow your business?
Yeah, so the administration side and the day-to-day and operations, pretty seamless. I have one other associate who here, our office is in downtown Manhattan. Clearly, we have not been there for quite some time now. We normally work from home 2 to 3 days a week. My associate is down the street from where I live here in New Jersey. So admin and operations, this is what we normally do now, just kind of more of that. So that's been fine. We're a lean practice. We don't have a ton of overhead outside of rent in a shared workspace in the World Trade Center. So we're able to be very nimble. We're tech enabled. Everything can be done from a phone and a laptop. So it's never really kind of bound us to a physical location in that traditional sense. And as far as client service and client acquisition go, service has been pretty good. There were those first 2 weeks where things were really crashing, that 33+% drawdown by March 23rd. So those early weeks in March certainly felt very different than post March 23rd, where things kind of shot back up, and now we're settling into kind of damage assessment, and everyone's really kind of taking a toll of the land here. And if you have more answers than questions, you're just full of it. There's don't lie to me. So from the service side, things have calmed down quite a bit. We covered a lot of ground, able to communicate broadly across the practice and handle individual calls. There was obviously a reshaping of what we do in any given day in terms of the types of calls and things we could address during the working hours when the market was open. So if there were trades or rebalancing that needs to be done. I mean, there was ultimately no way to accommodate a 60-minute phone call between the hours of 9 and 4 in those very hectic weeks. You needed to be available at scale. So short bursts of time to do trades and stuff like that. And then in the post-children go-to-bed hours, we handle the planned deliveries, the more strategic phone calls, or really just the longer types of discussions that need to take place, which lastly brings me to client acquisition. This has been one of the bright spots for the practice. People can look at turbulent times in the negative light, but there's often the other side of the coin, the opportunistic side, where people either get dissatisfied, or it's their call with their current advisor, or it's just a call to action. And I think it's more the latter. This is where a lot of folks, at least as far as the demographic that I serve, come out and say, wow, this has me pretty shook. I'm going to take the next steps here and get my financial life together, or really seek out a professional. So week after week, again, very fortunate that there's a lot of folks calling to inquire about financial planning and related services. So I'm very obviously happy about that. If you're expecting a downtime and you got new business coming in the door, what could be better than that?
Right. And your demographic, and I want to talk more about it as well, but for the time being, is the millennial investor.
Right.
And what kind of questions are you getting now? Are there a lot of concern from investors, or do you find more of your discussions now are, well, maybe I really should get to business and start planning stuff?
So again, just another tailwind of serving generally an older millennial demographic. So I'm 35 myself. I would say most of my clients are, plus or minus 5 years from my own age here. The good news is that, money is ahead of these clients. There's an exceptionally large amount of time to invest. So if we're talking about a 30-something-year-old, 20, 30-year investment time horizons, I would tell you there's not a lot of panic around what volatility they're experiencing in their portfolios, despite being fairly weighted towards equities. Not only because this is part of the discussions that we have in the context of financial planning. Sure, we don't want to see 30+% drawdowns. Sure, we don't want to see economic environments like we saw in 2008 and 2009 when we were just getting started with our lives. But there certainly hasn't been no conversation around these types of things. So we train them up pretty good. Not a lot of calls on the investment side. Certainly a lot of revisiting financial plans just to see what this might do. But really the emphasis is on jobs. So when you're talking about a young professional demographic, it's income that's often the greatest asset. So there have been a few, fortunately on one hand, furloughs and layoffs related to COVID-19. Their firms simply, you're going to read a lot more of this, not to keep putting a timestamp on this, but I think it's very important to understand, what likely is going to happen here. But I think maybe a contributing factor to that is a lot of white collar jobs that I service as far as with clients. And I don't think we've gotten to the point where, those professions, whether it be bankers, lawyers, these are typically the ones, in just all honesty, that are better able to work remotely. These are the non-essential jobs, right? And we haven't gotten to the point, I hope we don't get there, probably will, but we haven't gotten to the point where that's been impacted like, your bartenders, like your blue collar workers, things like that. There's a lot of pain there. So yeah, it's really around protecting income. And what does that translate into, I guess, when it comes to financial planning and the conversations that we have? Well, number one, there's always been an emphasis, and I felt very strong about holding large cash reserves and making sure people can sleep well at night, knowing they can handle not even your 3 to 6 month stereotypical reserve. I'm talking 9 to 12. A lot of clients have worked really, really hard to accumulate that level of cash, often at the expense of participating in the market. But here is where it clearly is paying off.
What is it about millennial investors that you think require a focus of their own as opposed to other investors?
Yeah, one word, it's relatability. It was just looking at, my own peers, now this is going years back, and realizing, you look at the demographics of the financial planning profession, the financial services industry, and you'll find a 55 to 65, male. And you start thinking about, well, is that who I want to relate to and talk about my financial goals with? Not just that, but what about my financial realities, right? Maybe it's student loans, maybe it's trying to afford a house and start a family. And obviously I work in the Northeast, and my clients are all over the country, but the biggest concentrations in the New York City area. So we're talking about really hardworking, a very competitive environment when it comes to jobs and how to earn income. And I'm not sure you want to be going to someone that looks like your mother or your father, who went to college 30 years ago, didn't take out student loan debt, didn't have to try and buy a house in, a very expensive, housing market. Even, things like having subscription services and data plans and all these expenses that we have today in this world that we live in, just completely different. Working spouses, my wife and I both work. That's fairly normal for where we are around here. Juggling the reality of all the things I've mentioned, plus kids and commutes to a city. I mean, this is something that really previous generations have never dealt with. So if you're going out there to try and talk about what your financial goals are and what you want out of life, and no offense to a 65-year-old advisor who's been doing this for 30, 40 years. They probably are extremely good at what they do. If they have a CFP and they're doing financial planning, God bless them. But you can't replace the fact that there is going to be a struggle on the relatability side.
Do you think that this experience now, this would be like the second kind of crises that this generation has lived through? You started your business during the financial crisis, or came to New York during the financial crisis. And these are two supposedly once in a lifetime generation type things. Do you think that scares off millennials from investing and from the stock market?
So I think there's two things here. I think there is, does this make millennials or younger investors more conservative in the context of their allocations if they choose to invest? Versus are they scared of investing in the markets altogether? And as far as investing in the markets altogether, I think the answer is no. Not make them scared to go play that game, to go, attempt to achieve a return on their capital. If they want their money to grow, that is one really good way to do it. I also think there's real assets and real estate and just traditional, things outside of marketable securities that can help them do that too. You might as well lump those into that same argument right there. And I think a good example of that is if you looked at, any young person's 401k or retirement account, should they have one? I think you're going to be hard pressed to see people sitting in cash or mostly bonds when they got 30, 40 year, investment time horizon. Like, really? Like, you're not going to find me a 2080 investor who's 29 years old, even if, the qualified default, investment options are the target date fund closest to your 65th birthday. So even if you're asleep at the wheel, you're mostly equities there.
Right.
Now, does it make them skittish with their dollars in terms of investing overall? I think the answer here is that by and large makes them feel like they might need to do a lot of other things before they invest overall, right? So between student loans, pandemics and recessions, and these once in a lifetime, now twice in a lifetime events, granted, there's a big difference between the credit market seizing up and the housing market collapsing and a health crisis that is creating a perhaps financial crisis, right? I mean, very important to make that distinction. But nonetheless, I think that young people, want to feel secure, and I hope they want to feel secure before putting risk on their money. I preach this day in and day out. I call it earning the right to invest. I from my own experience of 2008 and 2009, became very conservative when it came to making sure we had enough cash to be able to withstand an event like that. That's why the practice pushes 9 to 12 months and not 3 to 6 months in cash. Because I want everyone sleeping well at night. I want you to be able to not have to interrupt, your life. It already got interrupted.
So that's colored your view on just the cash buffer. That's grown bigger.
Everyone has this stigma there, and it's very real. And I think a lot of it, at least in terms of the clients that I work with, I think this in the way that I work with them and coach them and bring these concepts to them, there's a part of me that says, hey, good job, Doug. That narrative, that experience, and the way that you've baked it into their financial planning and your methodology is keeping them very safe right now. Is the reason you're not getting calls of panic, right? And then the other side is like, it's a health crisis. We're going to get to the bad part next. That's the cynical side of me. Like, it's going to get real. And we'll see how well your training really is. This is just the beginning here, and I don't mean to spook anyone, but that's a little bit of imposter syndrome that I think I struggle with pretty much at all times.
Are you seeing demand for other types of non-traditional asset classes from your clients?
No, I don't think people are looking for alts. I think they're looking for opportunity, right? So I think most of my calls, again, this is when you feel secure in your job, you have a really nice cash reserve, and you're super confident in light of epic uncertainty, right? A lot of folks know a discount when they see one. So before things ramp back up, 50% from that 33.5% drop at the close on March 23rd. Most of the calls were like, how do we, again, first world problem, it's not really a problem, it's a good problem. How do we take advantage of this, right? And as soon as that opportunity showed up, it poof was gone. So a lot of clients are still waiting, for those opportunities to avail themselves. I hope they don't. I don't want to root for them. But if they do, we'll be ready to take advantage.
Let's talk about the starting your business part of it, and maybe we can have a discussion a little bit about marketing and kind of brand building a little bit. So when you broke away and you started your own business, did you have clients already that you were able to rely on that came with you? You mentioned a couple things like buying businesses or buying a book of business. Did you do some of that as well? How did you build up your initial base of clients?
Great question. So I remember in my first 2-3 years in the city, there was an advisor who didn't want to service like the bottom 5% of their book and just put it out there to the office. So it was just an office in the Helmsley building on Park Avenue of franchisees. I think he just put it out there. Hey, I'm selling this pretty much non-negotiable 2 times revenue. And like, think about that for a second, like selling people, clients, relationships, like it inherently feels weird and sounds kind of bad, but nonetheless, I get it from how we, manage books of business or practices. And, here I am 24, it's in like the height of the recession. I get serendipitously in the mail is an offer from like Citi on a credit card teaser, 18 months, 0%, right? What business do I have? That's what you get for building good credit in college. So I get this teaser and and I see this advisor, selling clients. And I'm like, I'm doing the numbers. I'm like, look, I got basically free, like, what's my break even here? Because they produced revenue. And I was just like, look, as long as you make a good introduction and like actually facilitate the transfer of clients here, I'm in the black from day one. Like, I'll pay back this in 9 out of those 18 months. This is a no-brainer. And I did it.
Assuming you keep all of them.
Assuming, I even did attrition analysis to figure out if, X left. And they weren't going anywhere. I figure it was pretty high retention rate to begin with. All I had to do was sign a form or come meet with me. And I did that. So that is like early on buying clients, acquisition. By the way, not a fan of it. Not a fan of buying businesses and practices. Very legitimate way to grow a firm and grow a practice. So I'm not going to say, that's the reason. It's just not my cup of tea. And furthermore, there's no one selling, books of millennial clients. If there are, let me know. It's usually retiring advisors with older clients, and I just don't like the asset. But having said that, so there was that, and then just literally, the next decade I would spend building credibility, which probably tees us up for, being a very PR media focused practice. So the thing I do exceptionally well is I'm in the media, I'm in the financial media, and my PR game is super high. And that was just a grassroots building out contacts in that space. And when you're in New York City and you have a public relations degree and comms is kind of your thing, and you're good with social media and you can connect to people, it just seemed like a natural fit. So I remember my first quote. It was in Reuters, and it was awful. No, not to knock Reuters. It just didn't. I wasn't.
Did they get it right?
No, I just think like I wasn't trained up enough. I didn't know where the story was going. Usually today when I work with reporters, I'm prepped, ready to go. I know what I want to get in there. I know what they're looking for. It's just very fluid. So again, not to knock them, but nonetheless, it was my first line. And I was super pumped for that. And that kind of kicked it all off. So to give listeners perspective, over the last, let's say, 3 years, it's been over 400 media hits. And that encompasses everything from podcasts like these to, live hits on national television, sitting on CNBC's Financial Advisory Council, you name it. If there's a network or a financial publication or a journalist or a writer or an editor in the financial news, I probably know them and have a good working relationship with them. So that is a huge part of my practice's way of growing.
Can we delve into that a little bit? Maybe some best practices around that. And by the way, you are a great guest because you led right into where I was going next, which is this, and the PR aspect, because you're prolific. You are out there. And I guess with your PR background and schooling, what is it that other advisors can do? I don't know if any advisor can get the press that they want all the time. Where do they need to be? Do they really need to be active on social? Do you have any other tips of the trade, if you will, to help up their game?
Yeah, it depends on how they want to grow, and I have plenty of tips to provide. The first tip I would give, if media, talking to press, marketing, advertising, the whole kind of mass communications or integrated marketing communications thing is not your thing, if it makes you feel bad inside or you can't do it, that's okay. Don't try and go all in on something that's inherently uncomfortable. You can literally hire a lot of this away, or stick to traditional ways of going about growing your practice. But look, at the end of the day, as my dad would say, if you're not growing, you're dying. So you have to find your way to grow. So that's my tip number one. If it's not for you, don't do it. Don't try and build a Twitter presence. Don't go ham on social media. It might work against you, or you might just waste your time, and your time's obviously precious. But if you are interested in doing that and you want to grow into the future and you want to resonate with, when you think about growth, you inherently have to think about younger people than who you're serving, right? And you might not be the person to do that, but if you're a growing firm and you have younger associates and you want to see your legacy and what you built, survive another 20, 30 years, then 100% you should be interested, or at least support the associates and the younger advisors that you're bringing up behind you to embrace these things, because that's where business is going to be won. And it doesn't need to be becoming a personality on Twitter. It just maybe needs to be consistently producing your newsletter, writing a blog, having a LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter account in which you can communicate to your clients and to the public. There are so many ways to play this game that really it's just a matter of learning it. And I think anyone can. If you can learn how to use your iPhone, still this from Gary Vee, if you can learn how to use your iPhone, you can learn how to, use Twitter, or rather he said, if you can learn to drive, you can learn how to use an iPhone. And if you can learn how to use an iPhone, you can learn how to use social media, is kind of what I'm getting at here. Really botched that. But nonetheless, for me, it was simply a matter of credibility building. So I had to overcome an obstacle. The obstacle was I'm young, I'm young and I'm trying to make a name for myself in a profession that's dominated by people 30 years my senior. Like there's an inherent problem there. So, it was multifaceted as far as how I would go about solving that problem. The first was, education and pedigree. So that led me to going to get my MBA. And look, you don't need to go get an MBA, but for me in New York City, it led to going to NYU and enrolling in their part-time business school so I could continue to grow my practice, as well as get this pedigree and this network. It was really the network that I needed. And that, about halfway through is where I had the epiphany as I looked around the classroom and said, these are the people I want to be working with over the next 20, 30 years. So, what I originally went in to get a network and get this pedigree and yes, feed my ego even turned out to be, the light bulb that would go off as far as who I'd be marketing towards, right? And then there's leadership positions. So working with the CFP board and becoming the ambassador for the CFP board in New York, right? So that led nicely into getting exposure to press. If there was any reporter or anyone who wanted to understand how financial planning could positively impact the lives of those looking to achieve their goals, basically anyone, they would reach out to the ambassador. In that case, if it was in New York, it was me. So that gave me a lot of access. We joke in New York that our local news is your national news, right? It's true.
Yeah.
So, Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, all the major news outlets were right there in either downtown, midtown, or New Jersey. So that's where I said, you know what, I'm going to use my academic background of public relations to my advantage. And it was just reaching out reporter by reporter. I mean, I think I was spamming people in the beginning with some cheesy media kit pitch, and it worked.
Huh.
It landed me opportunities, right, for the New York Daily News, and you start to build this repertoire of press that you've done. And then, DouglasBoneparth.com came around while working in my previous partner's practice, and it was just to log the press I was getting and do a little bit of search engine optimization, which is a whole other, on the online or internet side of marketing thing, right? So you can see already this goes so many different paths. There's so many gears that are working really in one's marketing machine. And, as heavy as I am on PR and marketing and mainstream media, there's layers behind that, so I'm doing an interview with someone, I'll make sure a keyword gets in there, or you'll ask for that link back because you want the domain authority to be able to pop up higher in Google rankings. So when people search for financial advisor for millennials or New York is added in there, you're number 1, 2, or 3, they're clicking your site. Then you can get lost in hundreds of hours of how your website funnels people into getting to the contact form to request a consultation.
That's a
you
great
do all
point,
of you do all of these things, and you do them over and over and over. A/B testing, what works, what doesn't work, and you do that for 5 years. You will get. It almost seems like magic, like you're pulling a prospect out of thin air, but you're not. It took 5 years of building a marketing machine on the PR side, mainstream media side, search engine optimization side, credibility plays, leadership positions. So if you're asking, what do you have to do to get there? You got to put in a ton of hard work. The fool will get a line in the Wall Street Journal and think that their phone is going to ring with a prospect. That won't happen. Do it 400 times. I almost guarantee you will have no problem developing a pipeline for growth.
What piece of advice would you give somebody just starting their career now?
In the profession?
In any profession, or in
overall.
terms of overall, what piece of advice in terms of, just starting their career now, how they would approach it, and then planning for the future?
Yeah, don't be in a hurry to invest your money. That's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. That flies in the face of compounding returns, which, by the way, only work if you're compounding positive returns, right?
It works in the other direction too.
Yeah, it certainly does, and I think a lot that goes unsaid a lot of time here. If I could rewrite the script for how folks thought about entering the working years, graduating college or entering the economy, I would tell you, there's no harm in foregoing investing and securing, yourself through having cash, having liquidity. I would love, I mean, I can already tell you, gloves are off with me. If '08 wasn't enough, and I implemented this in my own life, and I preach it to my clients all the time, part and parcel of the way our firm works. Now this, we're done here. We're done. I'm tired of hearing articles about how Americans don't have enough cash to cover an emergency for, whether that article was BS or not. I'm tired of hearing about there not being enough cash savings on your average American to cover an emergency expense. I'm not going to tolerate that from my peers or younger generations. Why? Because you have to retire on time? Well, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Unless you can actually be consistent and disciplined with the investing that will help you get there. In order to do that, you need to be able to write out stuff like, what is this going to happen every 10 years now? Every 10 years, just going to turn the money printer on, listen to it go burr, and then, dig our way out of these crises while people suffer. Assets are moving from point A to point B. I want people to feel like they can get through anything, and it's okay if you come out of school or start your life and you just stack cash. There's nothing wrong with that. We're already redefining what financial independence and retirement means.
Yeah, you have some specific views on what retirement means, don't you?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? I've heard you talk about saving for retirement is an older generation thing, or that idea of that.
Yeah. So, my wife and I wrote a book, The Millennial Money Fix, where we, a couple of years ago, where we questioned what this notion of retirement is, really relabeled as financial independence. And, I like, if I cite my dad, he always defines retirement as when not working was optional, and affordable, right? So it didn't mean you had to stop.
Yeah.
It just meant you could if you wanted to. And I like that. And I think that's what financial independence really is giving yourself options and the opportunity to do what it is you want. And I think to go a step further from there is my generation, younger generations likely will have to rely on less entitlements and less security and less of a social safety net. And that might mean more part-time work or pursuing things you like to do that hopefully can make you money. I just don't see my generation doing what my grandparents did, which was retire. And again, from South Florida, retire in South Florida on a golf course, go to the deli at 5 o'clock, get fat and die. I mean, truth be told, it sounds kind of nice right now, but as a parent, I get it. I get it, but there's so many ways to create and be productive and have impact and do things that you love. The world is so different. My grandpa fought in World War II and fought for all our freedoms and did unimaginable things. He definitely deserves to sit on a golf course and eat himself silly and be with his grandkids and play card games and do all of that classic cliche retirement stuff. That definitely fits that mold. But that ain't us. No way. No way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see that being the case. The internet negates that right then and there.
So you got to find something you like doing, get to that happy place doing that, and find some independence over time.
Yeah. I like hearing that. And I think now at 35 and thinking about older millennials, with kids or, so far into their careers, what happens here is the responsibilities that you've assigned to yourself become so great that making some of those changes just become impossible. So yeah, it's kind of weird to say it might be too late for folks my age or even a little bit older and perhaps a little bit younger. But if there's any, 20-something-year-olds listening to this, I think the best thing you might be able to do is think about what you love to do. Stop caring about what anyone else thinks about that, and go pursue that. because you will likely have kids and start a family and take on liabilities and responsibilities, and you will discover just how hard it is to go back and change, what you did in terms of what you want to do.
What's one trend you see playing out over the next year or several years?
Yeah. So in light, I think a lot of it's going to be centered around what we're experiencing right now. Certainly commercial real estate, there's something to say about commercial real estate right now. And this is big city focused, I know, and I know there's listeners from all over the country, but I can't help but to think about what this means for, folks that work in big metropolitan areas like New York City. This, certainly from a white collar job perspective, will fundamentally change, how we go about working. So work from home, which brings me to thinking about commercial real estate as an asset, like who wants to acquire, 30 stories in a skyscraper if we're dealing with things like this. But then again, people forget. So it could be 3 years from now and we're right back to what 2018 and 19 felt like, not 2020. So there's something, if we're thinking about asset classes, there's something to be said right there. We're going to see who lives and who dies in the next several months, if not a year. Take a look at, the S&P 500 might look very different at the end of this. And that will show you what the trends really are. It's very interesting to see large tech growth, absolutely crush it. Like if you were looking for a discount, out of your Amazons and Googles and Microsofts of the world, you got nothing. you got 52-week highs is what you got. So that's interesting to see, and clearly a massive makeup, of the U.S. market right there.
It's an interesting dynamic,
Just in 4 or 5 companies. We talked about a theme of cash. I look at companies that have just been flooded or just have tons of cash on their balance sheet. Safe to say they're not going anywhere. And then I think we're going to look at a tremendous amount of disruption that I am still struggling to wrap my arms around. Multifaceted levels of disruption here. Healthcare is getting disrupted. Transportation, corporate real estate disrupted. Our political system getting disrupted. Commuting, work from home, the way we do all of these things. Energy market, oil, right? Talk about a timestamp here. Did you get paid for your barrels of oil, yesterday? Right. If work from home proliferates, which, by the way, is I wrote a blog post on that. I'll plug the blog. If you go over to Bonafide Wealth, you'll see all the stuff I've been writing about over the past 2 years. One of my favorite ones was commuting sucks, and I just did a deep dive into how much. I think it's 1.8 billion man hours lost to commuting, nationwide each year. That, and it was, and while work from home has doubled, from the 80s to today, and we're talking doubling being 2% to 4%, when percentages don't match the actual, real growth, that's a good example right there. So those are the things that, if you're talking about trends that I'm looking at, do they translate into investment strategies? Perhaps, but I think it's more conversation and commentary when I speak with clients about how they think about how they're investing and how they live their lives. That's most important. So, it's not your momentum trade. It's not your in and out trade. It's certainly more tied to financial planning.
Fantastic. All right, ready for the speed round?
Let's do it.
This is trend or fad. I'll mention a couple concepts, and you mention if it's a trend or a fad, in your opinion. Bitcoin, trend or fad?
Trend.
Buttered coffee, trend or fad?
Fad.
I hear you're a big coffee guy.
Yeah, never tried that once. I'll try it. I'm happy to try anything. I don't see that being a thing.
That didn't appeal to me at all. I haven't tried
it
yet. ESG, trend or fad?
Trend.
And how about fashion socks for menswear, trend or fad? The really bright ones that they wear with suits?
Yeah, I got them. I think men's fashion overall, including loud socks, trend.
Fantastic. You can ask one last question. It's
Sure.
it's your logo. Talk about your logo. Talk about your hair a little bit. How'd you settle on the logo for your business?
Great question. When I was doing that DouglasBoneparth.com and just starting to venture into, millennials and servicing that demographic, I remember sitting at my desk. I took a selfie, and I just carved out everything but the hair and made that the logo. And underneath that, the Douglas A. Boneparth. And I only received positive. I know it's vain, but for those who knew me and were supportive and fans and knew like hair was a thing, like they loved it, and I just went with it. So, talk about a big bet on your follicles. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I should be like crushing Propecia to make sure that do you have to insure it? I
was going to say, get that insured.
What happens if you lose your hair? I mean, I can change the logo. I mean, I guess that's what I'll have to do.
I love it. Thank you for that, and thank you for your time tonight. Really do appreciate it. How can people find you? What's your Twitter handle?
Yeah. I mean, easiest way is through Twitter. I mean, I'm there. So that's at Doug Boneparth. Bonafidewealth.com will get you there. Literally, just Google Douglas Boneparth, and you'll have no issue connecting.
Fantastic. Thanks, Doug.
Very welcome. Thank you.